Hello and welcome back to the Scrap. Today, me and Steve are joined by Andy Quildan, the main man over at Revolution Pro Wrestling. Andy, as I mentioned before we started recording, we have managed to get you at the busiest time of the year for you and your promotion. So thank you very much for your time. How has the day been playing out for you so far? As I'm sure it has been non-stop things to attend to.
Yeah, just very busy. I didn't sign up to this sea of paperwork. All I've ever wanted to do is just run fun professional wrestling shows and enjoy them. But it turns out that it's much like being an adult, isn't it? Like when you're younger, you can't wait to be a grown up, so you can do whatever you want. And then when you get there, the reality is bills and forms and paperwork and dreading every single time the postman comes. And yeah, running your own wrestling promotion is a lot like that. At the start, it's just a lot of fun and games, and then you aspire to be bigger. And as you get bigger, the responsibilities grow. The amount of paperwork you have to do grows. Yeah, it's it's art emulating life.
Absolutely. Well, talk about putting on fun shows. At the time of recording this, we had Summer Sizzler just a couple of days ago. This interview will be coming out about a week after, so we'll start there. And I've heard you tell the story already in other interviews about how the MJF Michael Oku match came together and MJF reaching out, which I'm sure is an offer as a wrestling promoter that you can't refuse. How along the process to booking that card does that start to become a reality where, okay, this is what is going to be happening at this event? Because like I said, you kind of have to accommodate someone like MJF when they say, I want to be on this show and I want to wrestle Michael Oku.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because obviously all the stars kind of aligned in the sense of we hadn't got a show in London that month, and we just purely because the 229, the venue we used, was having air conditioning installed. So we never had our final monthly London stop before the Copper Box Arena, and we always like to get those in because we love the energy that they create. So we sensed that there was an opportunity there. Of course, originally we were scheduled to be in Southampton on that day, and I absolutely love Southampton. We're going there this Sunday, or would have just been there, depending on when this comes out. But it's not big enough to accommodate what we would have needed for for Summer Sizzler, as you saw this past weekend at your call. So, it was almost a case of we needed to start making things move, making things happen, make the decision. The first step was seeing if we could move Southampton. Because again, what I didn't want to do as well is we tried to remain true to our to our fans, our venues, our routes, etc. And I didn't want to take a Southampton show away without being able to replace it. So that was the first port of call to see if we could possibly move the Southampton date, and then it came down to venues, and then it came down to, luckily a lot of the talent was already booked because they were booked for our Southampton show. So, that made life a lot easier. But once we committed, obviously we're kind of the levels of this happening are we're pretty sure it's going to happen at the start, and we've not there's not been anywhere along the way where we've had any indication it might not happen. But this is professional wrestling, and you have to understand that throughout the course of professional wrestling, there's things that are planned, things that you're looking forward to, things that you want to make happen, and things that look like they're an absolute certainty. And I look back to, for example, the planning for the anniversary show last year. There were things that we had planned, which are absolute certainties, and then there were things which, just didn't. And we based our decision on running the arena on some of these decisions, and then they didn't come to fruition because of circumstances completely outside of everyone's control. So, I'm prepared for that kind of thing to happen. So the mentality was, once you commit to it, we're just going to go all in and we're going to produce the best show we possibly can. We have confidence in our roster in being able to deliver that. I think they absolutely did at Summer Sizzler. And I think that obviously, to me, MJF versus Oku was the icing on top of a very nice cake. It's one of those things. Once we'd made the decision, it was full steam ahead. Let's make it happen.
Absolutely. I'll mention one other thing because it's kind of on the same point here before throwing to Steve to round out on Summer Sizzler. Obviously, you also had Donovan Dijak on the card and Trevor Lee, again, two great additions that if you'd asked me at the start of the year, or said to me that these guys were going to be on a RevPro card together, I would have been pretty surprised. And so it's kind of one of those things that just comes around, and it's a bit of a no-brainer booking to have these guys on that card. Again, in terms of timing and booking this event further, because like you said, you can book as far in advance as you want, but this is pro wrestling, things can change in an instant. So when do things like that tend to come into fruition, and like what's the kind of time frame for making them happen? Like is there a cut-off point where you're like, okay, this is the card, unless anything falls off, we're not changing things? Like, is there a cut-off period for you?
No, you've got to be fluid. That's the thing, the fluidity is the key. I think that you have to have confidence in your vision of where you're headed, but you can't be stubborn enough to not have an open mind about changing stuff if you have to. So yeah, that's pretty much it. There's never you never shut your mind off. Like if someone came to me, if I've got a show on Sunday, what are we now? We're on Tuesday. If someone came to me on Friday night with something which was too good to turn down, then we'd see how we could incorporate it into Sunday's show. That's the way it goes. That's the way it works. And I think that especially in today's modern world, where everything is so instant now, isn't it? Everything, you can access anything with a click of the fingers. So because of that, you have to be able to move on the spot. You have to be able to pivot. You have to be flexible. And like I say, above all, keep that open mind. And you know what I mean? We're doing what's best, what we believe is best for the fans, what I would like to see as a fan, and we're just making it happen.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of instant, I haven't been able to watch the card back yet. I will be doing that after work today on RevPro On Demand, so people should go and check out Summer Sizzler before we get to the anniversary show. But Steve was there in attendance, so I'll let him take it away with some more questions about the event.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, you started the show in the ring, Andy. We don't see that this often these days, but we did obviously have a really nice tribute at the start to James Castle. Obviously emotional for everyone in RevPro. We saw everyone on the stage. We saw the guys who were obviously closer to James that stayed on the stage during the match. When you're putting something like that together, almost is it easier or difficult or more difficult? Because is it easier in the sense that everyone loved Jamie, everyone wants to pay tribute to Jamie, or is it more difficult in the sense that we saw Gideon's video, we saw how emotionally taxing it was for Gideon, for Dan, of course. And when you're putting something like that together, just what goes into it?
For Jamie, it was in many ways it was harder because we wanted to do Jamie justice. You need to understand, like, Jamie was one of my closest friends. He was someone that if it wasn't for, and this is not just a wrestling thing, this is not just like a, he was one of my friends at wrestling. This is someone who I became friends with because of wrestling, but our friendship outside of wrestling meant so much more than anything that was, would happen in the squared circle. But Jamie was, without Jamie, Revolution Pro Wrestling probably wouldn't be here to this day. He was one of the first trainees through the door at the Portsmouth School of Wrestling. He was a first graduate at the Portsmouth School of Wrestling. He was the first person who we trained from scratch. But he just had this work ethic which was second to none, and would help with the setup and everything. And even as recently as when in COVID, obviously when there were strict rules and everything, and we had to turn our wrestling school into like an empty arena setting, the person I called to kind of make it happen alongside myself was Jamie. And it was just unfortunate that he was never able to partake in the tapings because it was shortly after that he got sick for the first time. And he came back towards the end and did some commentary with me, which was also a lot of fun. And I'm aware I'm kind of going away from the point a little bit, but yeah, like I say, he was so important and integral to so much stuff that we've done. He was hugely underrated as a professional wrestler. I don't really think in a situation like this that even matters, because obviously we're talking about himself as a person and how much he meant to everyone. But something that obviously in his situation, in the battle that he was going through, we spoke a lot. And to me, I just always said to him that I promise we'll keep his memory alive. I promise we'll make sure what a significant contribution he had to all this was, and promised that he did leave behind a legacy. Anyone who knew him would tell you he was his own biggest critic, and I don't think he really realised the impact he made upon everyone. And I think that this past Sunday was a perfect illustration and an example of that. So, like I say, like the pressure, normally stuff like that is kind of is hard in the sense of we're trying to do something in a way that honours the person and is as tasteful as possible, and but it's normally kind of easy in the sense that because everything's coming from the heart, there's no real wrong answers in those situations. But Jamie put such an immense amount of pressure on himself, and then that in turn gave us that immense amount of pressure to try and put the attention into detail that Jamie would have wanted. And, like I say, I think it was a beautiful tribute. I'm so glad that so many people could be together, and I think that it's a reminder, like Portsmouth who have had such a tough year, and I think that the whole thing and being around each other again was a reminder about special bonds that kind of have been created. So it was for me a very fitting way to start the event, and it was the stage that it deserved. Jamie was special. It was a special match and a special moment.
Yeah, and you mentioned obviously the tough year for Portsmouth School of Wrestling. Even in that match, Dan being in the match, we saw the code breaker out of the corner. In many ways, it was a tribute to Curtis as well. Even the picture on the screen was a picture of Jamie and Curtis, things like that.
Yeah, there was, it's impossible to, basically, Jamie and Curtis were both the fabric of our school, and I've said Curtis was someone who was. So Jamie was like the elder statesman. He was like the person that everyone looked up to. Curtis had many different roles within the school. When he first started, he was almost the child. And he was like the younger brother. And then there's like another set of people too, who was like the older brother too. And then he used to coach our kids' classes as well. So to those, he was like a kind of, I guess, a father figure to those as well. He wore so many different hats. I think it's kind of unfair to label Curtis as a comedy wrestler only. He was a fine technician, brilliant wrestler, and he did comedy wrestling in context. And I think that we shouldn't underrate Curtis's contributions as well. But yeah, it's impossible. We are all linked together, and it's impossible to separate, the whole group. It's much more. I'm not sure if it's a reflection of the times. I'm not sure if it's just because we're growing up. I'm not sure the reasoning, but kind of that kind of group is probably I don't know, just so close, just like family, and it's almost like a body, and every part is as important and critical as another, so that's I guess the way I'd term it. It's not, we're not looking at, again, I don't think it's fair to kind of club them together because I think both very valid for individual contributions, but I do think at the same time you can't take away from the fact that we are all intertwined, but it's all because of professional wrestling.
Yeah, of course. I spoke to JJ Gale last night, obviously Portsmouth School of Wrestling, and the timeline didn't even really align with Jamie. Like, he didn't even know Jamie that well, but the amount of respect he had and the way he looked up to him just for being the first guy from that school to win a belt, to make it to your call, is just something that was immediately evident. One more for me on Summer Sizzler, and it's obviously just in the grand sense, it's like a build up to Copper Box, but that having a main event like that is really like a milestone event of its own. So when you have such a big show like that, I know you're very busy, obviously, especially now with Copper Box in 2 weeks. Are you able to kind of reflect on what you've just done and the show, the match you've been able to put together? Or is it sort of all hands on deck, get to the next thing?
No, it's one of those things where I'm sure at some point, somewhere along the line, we'll be able to sit back and reflect on everything that we've achieved. But like, I even feel like, for example, if I look at last year's event, it was such a huge milestone for us. The last year's event at the Copper Box, that is. And it was just business as usual moving forward. And aside from obviously the extra exhaustion that came with it, it was very hard to kind of look back at what we've achieved. And you look back at pictures of it now, and you're like, wow, that was pretty cool, you know. And I think that's one of the hardest things about running a company with a vision, with the mindset of constant growth, continually moving forward. It means you have to think about tomorrow all the time. I've seen a lot of people across the years make the mistake of building towards an event, and that event happens, and then tomorrow comes, and it's almost like, well, what do we do now? You know, we kind of have to start again, right? And I made a big point of saying, like, so many people in the build up to last year's show, so many people said to me, this feels like a culmination of everything that Revolution Pro Wrestling's worked for. And I was like, no, it's just a beginning, right? You can't look at it as an end point. It's a chapter point. It's a bookmark. It's something that we deserve to be able to celebrate and look back on. But the reality of the situation is we finish that show at the Copper Box on the Saturday, then we're thinking ahead to Germany, Friday, Saturday, London on Sunday, and then we're looking ahead to the British J Cup, Global Wars UK, the Trios tournament, you know, all of this stuff to look forward to. So it does make it very hard to be able to kind of sit back and reflect. And like you say, we had that great show this past weekend. Do we have time to reflect upon that? Not really, because the reality of the situation is, first things first, we have to make sure the VOD goes up, get that up. Like I say, it's a very small team. It's, you know, I was working tirelessly on that VOD yesterday. Annoyingly, I had it finished super early. But just as an example, yesterday morning, so we got back at, I don't know, like early hours of Monday morning. Get to Monday, again, I wanted to be able to work in it on the ride home, work on the show on the ride home, to be able to, you know, speed up the process of getting it up. But there was an issue with copying it across from one of the computers to an external hard drive to be able to copy it. So we had to make a decision: do we sit at your call for, you know, another 45 minutes whilst we sort out this hard drive and get the stuff across, or do we just go home? And we made the decision to go home, and I'm quite glad we did. But then the next morning, I get up super early, maybe 6 in the morning, to try and get this sorted. Realise there's an issue with the audio feed. So the issue with the audio feed wasn't from the live stream; it was from the capture. So if you'd watched it live, you wouldn't have heard the issues with the audio. However, your call's the worst venue for signal, so it was quite. I think it took like 10 parts in the end, the show, which shows you that the signal was no good in that venue. So it wasn't like we had a clean feed of audio. And of course, the memory cards with all the audio on was at my office. So it's about 6:30 here. I'm driving back into my office, a place I'd left only a few hours earlier, to get the card and then get everything done. And then, then got all the stuff, got it all sorted, uploaded it all, and then it just took hours and hours to transcode for some unknown reason. Meanwhile, everyone's going, when's the show going up? When's the show going up? When's the show going up? And I've had no sleep, done everything I can to get it up on time. But yeah, we, like I say, and what I deliberately did as well. So sometimes we just leave the live stream. Well, we normally leave the live stream version up. When the show's finished, we leave the live stream version up, and then we replace it with the high quality version. However, any time we've had high-profile shows, people have pirated the shows, the live version of the stream, often via a screen recording as well, which brings the quality down even further. And then people pirate our shows, and then they go online and complain about the quality of the shows, a show that they haven't paid for, and a show that doesn't represent the final quality of the show. And in many ways, it does more harm than it definitely does more harm than good. But like, it gives people a perception that our quality isn't very good. Now, we are a growing company, and we're a company which, across the course of the last 12 years, has consistently gone about improving our production. And it's very, very annoying, disheartening, upsetting when you put all this effort into trying to ensure there's a higher level of production, and because someone has decided to steal your product illegally, that becomes the perception of what the product, the final version of the product looks like. So that's why obviously we took the show down before putting the final version back up. So no time to answer to your question. It's just been busy.
No, I'll pass it back over to Kyle in a second, but since you mentioned obviously the production there, just as someone who does subscribe to RevPro On Demand, the improvement in the production over the last few months, year, is very evident.
Well, I'm glad that you can notice it, because so many times, it's one of those things, isn't it? And I get it, but I feel like we were often unfairly judged. We were judged on similar metrics as like a WWE and an AEW, and people within their rights to judge it, because obviously we are charging for the service. Our metrics aren't quite the same as a WWE, AEW, New Japan, but yeah, it's when things don't go right, that's when you hear about it. But when things do go right, you very rarely hear that positive feedback coming back. It's always, it's a very British thing to do. It's a very wrestler fan thing to do, isn't it? It's point out the negatives, and just if the positives are there, you just quietly acknowledge them with a nod of the head.
Kyle?
Yeah, well, we're going to move to talking about the anniversary show, which we've kind of already been chatting about, because there's no way to avoid it. August 24th at the Copper Box. To kind of start off, I think the best place to go straight off the bat, the thing that was first announced for the main event, where you've got Michael Oku and Luke Jacobs. I want to know a bit about the decision making to go with this for the main event, because I think if people are familiar with RevPro, if they're regular viewers, this has been building for some time now. They know to expect this. They know that this is going to be amazing. But I'm sure on your behalf, there was a decision to be made about whether you bring someone in from overseas to bring kind of a big name, or whether you have two homegrown guys in the main event, which I think there's probably positives and drawbacks to doing that. I personally, again, if you're a fan of RevPro or you're just a fan of great wrestling, it's going to be an incredible match. So it's not anything to do with the quality of the match, but I'm sure there is maybe a conversation there about that you've had to have at some point about whether this is the match for this particular show because it's the biggest one of the year.
Well, the reality of the situation is at some point you have to have faith in your own product. You have to have faith in your own talent. And I think that we've demonstrated that time and time again. We have a very, I'm not sure the word to use really, but we have faith in our talent. We strongly believe that our wrestlers are up there, compete alongside and against the very best wrestlers in the entire wrestling world. No exceptions. It may seem like I'm being overly confident in saying that, but listen, I watch wrestling. I watch a lot of wrestling. I watch a lot of Revolution Pro Wrestling, and I know what we do. Pound for pound is as good as, if not better than, any wrestling in the world. The only thing that we have different is we don't have the platform to be able to deliver it on. And then there's obviously, we can look at numerous reasons why we don't have that, but I choose to say, we're a company which is in growth. We're a company that, if you were to look at where we were 12 years ago to where we are now, you can see the clear growth. You can see the fact that We've not had a penny of investment. The only time we've ever had to borrow any money at all was during COVID, which was just quite simply to survive that time. But like I say, we've had no investment. We've had no outsiders come in and finance things. We've done it all ourselves through hard work, through one fan at a time, through ticket sales, through merchandise sales, through VOD subscriptions, and we're continuing that growth. And a big part of that continuing of the growth is understanding our worth. And I think that the wider universe might not understand our worth. They might look at it and say, well, in the grand scheme of things, who are Luke Jacobs and who's Michael Oku? But that's fine, because they will find out who Luke Jacobs and Michael Oku are. Because, like we said to you, like you said, from an in-ring perspective, they're going to deliver, right? They're going to deliver up there more than any match could. I'm sure of it. I don't think there's a match that we could put on that show, be it using an imported talent or homegrown talent or a mix of both or crazy dream matches. I don't think there's a match in ring that can touch Luke Jacobs versus Michael Oku right now. And it seems like a bold statement, but that's why they're in that position in the main event of the Copper Box Arena. And like I say, we understand that when you're building something, and when you're trying to make talent, and when you're when you're going through this process, it's no coincidence that we've got the most depth of talent that we've ever had. It's no coincidence how young our roster is, how exciting it is for the future, and how for a fact that we are going to lose some talent as we go along because they're so talented and they're going to be plucked. We've seen, obviously, recently Callum Newman go to New Japan Pro Wrestling. Gabe Kidd's making waves out there right now. Robbie X is going off to CMLL, and then you can only predict great things for his future. So we know we're going to lose talent here and there, but the depth is such that we're not going to miss it. Well, we are going to miss it, but we're not going. But we've got people to come and fill those spots, and the quality isn't going to dip as a result of that. So that's what's so cool about the talent right now. But in order to get there, you have to take risks. You have to take risks along the way. And it might be a case of when we use a talent which is less established, because obviously within British wrestling, so there's like niches. Wrestling's a niche. Independent wrestling is a niche of that niche, and British professional wrestling is a niche of a niche of a niche. And as you get inside each niche, that audience grows smaller and smaller and smaller. But within the niche of British professional wrestling, there are established names, or at least there were at the time more established names, people who fans would recognise more, and people who may be more excited to buy a ticket for than someone they've not heard of before. And if you want to be lazy, if you want to, or be in your comfort zone, then you can stick with those talents. You can stick with that same circle of talents, and just keep repeating a method of success, right? However, if you're going to safeguard the future, if you're going to build depth, you have to use new, exciting, fresh talent. But to do that, there's an inherent risk all the time. It's not going to be 100% perfect every single time, because you have to learn lessons. You have to learn lessons by making mistakes. So you could put, a safer, you could play it safe. You could put someone who the fans recognise, who they're like, oh, yay, we get to see Wrestler X, and we get to, see them against another familiar wrestler. Odds are they would have seen that match 100 times across the UK scene anyway. But it's a nice match to see, so that gives us confidence in buying the tickets. And also, in putting that match on as a promoter, as a matchmaker, I know that they're going to have pretty much a flawless match, which is going to be absolutely fine, right? Is it going to be something we haven't seen before? Probably not. But is it going to be executed excellently with no flaws? Probably, because they have the benefit of the experience. But you can only get that benefit of experience if you have the experience in the first place. So we have to take risks in putting people in those positions to make mistakes and trust that they learn from those mistakes. Help them grow, help develop them, and also to have enough faith in them to know that, yeah, we might take a hit. And look, when we're talking about a niche, we could be talking about 20, 30 tickets. So it may not seem significant to the wider universe. However, 20, 30 tickets to a 200-seat venue is quite significant, right? So, so we take that risk, but we know we're safe in the knowledge it's going to pay off long term. And those fans that see those wrestlers perform will then go and tell their friends about those wrestlers. And then those wrestlers, before you know it, become household names that you recognize. You know, and that's where people like a JJ Gale come in, people like Joshua James, people like David Francisco, you know, who you may not have been aware of, you know, Cameron Kai, Will Caven, guys like that, who you probably wouldn't have been aware of at the start, but you're becoming more and more aware of them right now, right? And that's what's exciting. And I guess if you look at Michael Oku, you look at Luke Jacobs, they're two wrestlers that are further on in that process. They started that process with us, and they've got the plaudits of wrestling fans around the country, around Europe, maybe even around the world. And so now they're kind of almost on that established level. But they're established as our homegrown stars, but now we need to make them established to the wider world. And what legitimizes you more, the main event in headlining the biggest show in Revolution Pro Wrestling history. And I say that, sat where we are right now. We're tracking neck and neck of where we were last year, which I think is very impressive due to a number of reasons. Obviously, the Wembley Stadium show hasn't sold as many tickets yet as it did last year. Also, when you go in somewhere for the first time, so when Revolution Pro Wrestling goes into a big arena for the first time, there's that first time factor, right, which gets people excited. And we also had that marquee match of Will Ospreay versus Shingo Takagi. So I think the fact that we're tracking alongside that show, you know, with no former WWE superstars like Mickie James, Hall of Famers, you know, we're tracking alongside that show. I think that's a testament to Luke Jacobs. I think that's a testament to Michael Oku. I think that's a testament to Revolution Pro Wrestling as a whole. And I hope that as we kind of go into this final stretch of promotion, heading up to you know, the big show on August 24th, I'm hoping that, you know, it captivates the wider audience's imagination and emotions. And I hope there's a lot of people who are going to be in town for Wembley Stadium who are like, you know, what else am I going to do on a Saturday? You know, so I don't know. It's an exciting time, and I think that it more than justifies the decision to put them in that spot. And I know for a fact that they will justify that decision of being in that spot come the end of the show on Saturday. And I think that it's one of those things as well, whereby it's almost like the next phase in Revolution Pro Wrestling's development. Because last year we did it, but we did it with Ospreay and Shingo. And yes, Ospreay's a homegrown guy as far as we're concerned. RevPro's his home promotion, but he's an international superstar. And so is Shingo. And it hits that right demographic, doesn't it? You know, in terms of, they've had 5 matches. The lowest rated one was 5 stars. And it's an epic rivalry. It's a legendary rivalry. And, you know, when it's all said and done, and we look back over historic rivalries, and you talk about your Omegas and Okadas, Ospreay and Shingo is going to be right up there with them. And we were privileged, obviously, to have a chapter of that play out within the UK. But like I say, this year we don't have something like that to lean on. And that's great, because that shows you the development. That shows you that the hard work we've put in for the last 12 months has been worth it. And I feel like it's just, like I say, the next step. Not the culmination, not the finish line, but the next step. And we'll see where we can take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm super glad to hear that when you made that decision to, like you've said, bet on yourself, really bet on what you've built over anything else, and that it's paid off for you so well, like you said, with the tracking and everything like that. So that's great to hear. And like you said, it'll be a fantastic main event. I'll throw it back towards Steve for some more questions on the anniversary show.
Yeah, you mentioned him there, and you mentioned obviously putting guys in positions to make mistakes and then grow from that. The person that comes to mind immediately is JJ Gale. And obviously he's wrestling Tomohiro Ishii at the show, which is a match that before JJ had those matches with Luke, I would have never seen that as like a match that would happen. So talk about I guess, the growth in JJ. He's obviously a tall guy, but he was obviously known for wrestling that fast-paced, agile style. He was wrestling with Callum Newman as a tag team, of course. And then obviously since wrestling Luke Jacobs, it's almost opened him up a little bit into this new style of wrestling, leading to Ishii, which is like the S tier of that style of wrestling. Just talk a little bit about that match and and JJ's growth.
So JJ's obviously someone who's come through our wrestling school, Portsmouth School of Wrestling. JJ Gale is someone who's come through our Contenders division. He started off in the Black Trunks, whilst he had the opportunity to wrestle in front of our crowds, grow familiar with the crowds, grow before our crowds. So the crowds almost they knew who he was. They were able to kind of watch him grow before their very eyes, and that in and of itself then creates a bit more of a connection. Then when you start to take a few more risks, and you start to find who you are, become yourself, you grow in confidence because you know the crowd's on your side, you know the crowd's willing you on and wanting you to succeed. And I think that's a big part, that's a big secret to the whole thing, because realistically, none of this matters apart from the connection that you're able to make with the people. That's the way people become draws in this business. Look at the connection that people like Cody Rhodes have made with the people. And Cody Rhodes had to go away from WWE and come back to be able to create and strengthen that connection with the people and understand exactly who he was. Now, I'm not likening JJ Gale to Cody Rhodes right here, but you know, the philosophy is very similar. So JJ has grown before these people's eyes, and he's created that connection. Now, something I mentioned earlier, this is the youngest roster we've ever had. Now, a big part of that, as I'm sure anyone who's grown up will tell you, is obviously when you're younger, you're obviously a lot more slender. And as you get older, you start to be able to put on size a bit easier. You grow a bit smarter about what to eat and, you know, what works for you in terms of in the gym, in terms of eating plans, in terms of everything, right? So he has subtly and gradually been putting on size throughout this time. And you see it a lot in professional wrestling. You see it a lot in professional sports, where wrestlers start off in, and athletes start off in lower weight classes. And then, you know, as they progress through their careers, you see them move up in kind of weight classes. And JJ Gale has subtly done that before our very eyes. Revolution Pro Wrestling, we've seen Michael Oku do it. We've seen Ricky Knight Jr. do it. We've seen Luke Jacobs do it. You know, so it's not an uncommon thing to happen. And in terms of you know, people not expecting that match, like I think after his match with Luke Jacobs, that match becomes attractive, right? That match becomes something where you're like, oh, actually that'd be very, very good. But until he had that match with Luke Jacobs, I don't think anyone would be thinking along that wavelength. Now, JJ Gale's always had that in him. He's always had the ability to be able to compete on that level, but in many ways he had to prove it to himself. He had to prove it to the fans, and I think that he's been able to do that. And in doing that, he's kind of put himself in this position whereby we're able to announce JJ Gale versus Tomohiro Ishii, and rather than people go who, or people say, you know, like, oh, I never saw that match coming. People are like, yes, I've been waiting for this match, you know. And if you look at where JJ Gale is now to where he was entering last year's anniversary show against Kosei Fujita, this is a different JJ Gale night and day in terms of, you know, his preparation, being ready for the contest, in terms of the performer that's going to turn up on the night, and in terms of the anticipation for the contest and the belief that the people have in him to be able to deliver on that occasion. This is a high pressure environment for him. He's not lost. I don't think the situation's lost on him in any way, shape, or form. He's going to be preparing for that situation diligently, and he's going to be utilizing all the lessons he's learned along the way. And I feel that, although it's not a match we look back and say it was a spectacular match, I think one of the most important matches in JJ's career was that match he had against Zack Sabre Jr. in December of last year, because that showed him I can hang, and that showed him I can get hit by Zack Sabre Jr. and realize I'm not made of glass, and it takes away the fear factor, you know, and it only aids the confidence. You know, when you can hang with one of, if not the best wrestler in the world, it does nothing to enhance your confidence. So this is where he is. This is where he is going into that match with Ishii. It's going to be a hell of a professional wrestling match. Of course, there's the underlying story of he wants to one-up Luke Jacobs. Of course, we said JJ Gale's kind of I guess if Luke Jacobs is kind of maybe a step along in his journey, that JJ Gale is perhaps where Luke Jacobs was last year. And in fact, is exactly where Luke Jacobs was last year, in the sense that he's stepping in the ring against Tomohiro Ishii, a former undisputed British heavyweight champion and a man who's been responsible for so many great Revolution Pro Wrestling moments. And I just feel that, he's worked hard, he's earned this opportunity, he's earned this moment, and it's his chance to make all that work count. And it's going to be great to see it go down at the Copper Box Arena. And dare I say that it's going to be a great opportunity for JJ to make some new fans.
Yeah, and if you're watching this interview, there will already be an interview with JJ Gale up on the channel that will have gone up a few days ago. So go and watch that one after this one. We talked for an hour. It was a great look into JJ Gale ahead of the biggest match of his career. There's no doubt about that. I want to talk to you about the women's division. Obviously, we've seen a lot of growth in the women's division, mainly through bringing in the Cutthroat Collective and that storyline. But you as a promotion got a lot of criticism for generally being like the one match a show women's division, which was kind of the norm in a lot of promotions. You weren't the only people getting criticized for that. But, over these last few months, we have seen 2 women's matches, 3 women's matches on some shows, as well as, I think, on last Sunday at the Copper Box, we had 10 women involved in the show. So talk a little bit about the growth you've made in that regard and why this was the right time to go all in on that.
Well, anyone who's listened to me across the years will know I've been very consistent in my message that, it doesn't matter to me, male, female, black, white. None of this stuff matters to me. Couldn't care less. What I care about is putting on the best show possible, regardless of anything attached to it, right? So I would hate to think that someone thought that they were on my show to tick a box. And so as a result of that, it opens you up to criticism, because some people feel that you have to do these box ticking exercises. Now, we have had a ton of bad luck with our women's division. You can look at it, and I'm not making excuses. We just have had a lot of bad luck.
Alex Windsor and Kanji come to mind.
Alex Windsor and Kanji, and the amount of people, we lost a lot of women to NXT UK. The amount of last minute changes I've had to make on a show because someone's been injured or transportation issues, etc. It's just been crazy. It's been like the world's been trying to work against me. Now, I've always said that my end goal with the women's division is to be able to have a proper division, to be able to have depth in that division, and to be able to have more than one women's match on shows, obviously, because that's what dictates a division. It can't just be champion versus challenger, champion versus challenger. And to do it using the best talent, and to do it with the same mindset that we have with the men's division, with no separating the two. We want to bring young talent through. Anyone who's seen our work with Lucia Lee recently will have seen that fact. Obviously, we've brought through wrestlers through our training school that unfortunately are no longer in the business. So, we've had bad luck. But I believe that if you've watched Revolution Pro Wrestling, again, I always say, and it's so annoying because, look, when we were part of this rebuilding process, right? And in 2019, so we obviously took such a hit with the NXT UK stuff, but we started rebuilding straight away from that moment. When we hit High Stakes 2020 at York Hall, which was our last big show before the pandemic, you saw when Giselle Shaw won the Women's Championship, Mike Loku won the Cruiserweight Championship, Will Ospreay won the Heavyweight Championship, and you saw from that point how our building blocks that we've been starting to put in place were finally starting to grow and come into fruition, and then boom, the world shuts down with the global pandemic. So we again started that process again at the top of 2020, or in the middle of 2020 in our empty arena shows. Now, look, I'm not going to go into naming names or whatever, but within the Oh, and as well, so and as part of that as well, you know, the last show we had before the pandemic in London was at the Cockpit, and you had Killer Kelly come in. She just left NXT, and you had her come in and attack Giselle Shaw. So you see the direction. You know, there was depth starting to build. And then obviously when it got to, I feel like I'm just making excuses here, but I'm just trying to contextualize everything because I think it's so important to add context to what we're doing. But then obviously in the pandemic, when we're doing the empty arenas, one of the girls who was factored in, one of the girls retired in the middle of the tapings, right? And one of the girls who was factored in, who did a run-in on one of the empty arena tapings, injured herself whilst doing the run-in, and then couldn't factor in any other tapings, and we couldn't bring anyone else in to take her place because of the COVID rules, right? And then in addition to that, the girls who were building around in that time, Aaliyah James and Jamie Hayter, then went elsewhere, right? So you can't say that we haven't tried across the years, right? And the women's division has been factored into the mindset of that big rebuild that we've been trying to do. And then obviously when we came back, we're looking at Kanji, we're looking at Alex Windsor to be our, you know, two of the key members of that roster, and they got injured. So it just kept feeling like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But now finally, touch wood, we've got a great sea of wrestlers who are healthy, who are fit, who are able, and you can see that depth. And the Cutthroat Collective have been fantastic. And you know, as I say, like we were introduced to Sapphire Reed, Mercedes Blaze in the lead up to this thing. Nina Samuels and Lizzie Evo, who were people who weren't available to me, and now they've become available. You know, Nightshade's been has wrestled consistently for me. Obviously, we know about Alex Windsor, we know about Danny Luna. You know what I mean? It's all basically it's all come into place at the right time, and we now have depth in our women's division, and by having 5 members of a Cutthroat Society, we have 5 potential singles matches. We have tag matches that can happen throughout that. So, you know, we could have realistically a whole women's show marketed as a Revolution Pro Wrestling show with 1 men's match on the show without it being called a women's wrestling show. It can just be called a wrestling show because we've built these women, we've built this division, we've built these characters, we've built this story, right? So obviously, you've got those 5 women. Now we need to build some, and they've been built strongly, and now it's about building some foil for them, whilst at the same time, and then one of the big things, and again, Stephanie Vacour, losing her, that's another hit to that women's division, you know? So, like I say, I'm cursed, right? But Danny Luna's in a separate, you know, it was very conscious that Danny Luna was in that separate match at the Copper Box, or is in that separate match at the Copper Box, because we want to make sure that it's not just champion versus challenger. So obviously, as you saw at Summer Sizzler, yes, the champions path will no doubt cross with a Cutthroat Collective. But that doesn't mean it's just champion versus challenger, champion versus challenger, champion versus challenger. There's depth, there's a division, and you know, I hope now that rather than questioning it, people can see it. Because before, I had to, you know, almost defend our stance, defend our position. But I can guarantee you that every single person involved in this thing knows they're there because of merit, and that's the only way they wouldn't have wanted. That's the only way they would have wanted it. They wouldn't want to have been booked to tick a box. They want to be booked because of merit, because they add to the show, because they bring something different to the show, and that's exactly what everyone does. And every single person who competes on a Revolution Pro Wrestling show deserves their position, deserves to be there. Yeah, there's no need to box off male, female, any race, you know, anything, you know. Yeah, I guess that's kind of where we're at, and that's put us in such an exciting situation. And you know, it just gives us, like I say, it gives us more options to play with, and it just only further enhances the depth of talent.
Yeah, you obviously mentioned Danny Luna there. Obviously, with the Stephanie Vacour situation, she's without an opponent. I know you're not going to give anything away here, but is there any idea when we might hear an opponent?
Before Sunday, before Saturday, sorry, before Sunday. Yeah, you'll know by Sunday because the show will be over. So yeah, we're working. Yeah, this is one of the things that we've been working on, and there's moving people. Like this is again, what people don't understand is there's moving pieces. Is there we have solutions for sure, but we're working with moving pieces because we move one piece and that affects another piece. It's the butterfly effect, isn't it? So we are working with those moving pieces. But like I say, what we've made it very clear is there will be a women's championship match. Danny Luna will be defending her gold, and it will be a fantastic professional wrestling match. Maybe by the time you put this interview out, we will have announced what we're doing. But it's not something that women's championship match isn't something that I anticipate we will keep a surprise until the day. I anticipate we will announce that in advance. And if we don't announce it in advance, it's because we don't know what we're doing. So
yeah. Is there pressure to make sure you're bringing in someone of an equivalent level to Stephanie there? Because obviously she'd become sort of one of the biggest female names outside of WWE, outside of AEW technically. And now obviously she's gone into WWE with big fanfare immediately, which they don't always do. That kind of shows the level of stardom she has. Do you feel pressure with that?
Well, I want to stress Stephanie Vaquer, obviously. She did compete for us in May. She had 2 matches in May against Kanji and Rio. Great matches at Your Call. Never sleep on these opportunities to see these wrestlers. We often get in ahead of the curve because, believe it or not, I like a lot of professional wrestling. I watch a lot of professional wrestling. I was insistent to CMOL that I wanted to bring Stephanie Vaquer across to the UK for the Fantastic Mania UK shows. I was insistent to CMOL that I wanted Stephanie Vaquer to be a long-term part of Revolution Pro Wrestling wherever she was available. Obviously gutted that has been unable to happen, but I'm absolutely thankful and fortunate that we were able to get to work with Stephanie Vaquer. I'd like to wish her obviously nothing but the best in her career and the decisions that she's made, because ultimately you've got to make the decision that's best for you. So selfishly, I'm disappointed, but I am very happy for her, and I'm sure that, you know, if utilised correctly, if given the opportunity, she will show the world exactly what all the hype was about. And yes, leading into the question, yes, that does bring on a level of pressure, but that's a level of pressure that I'd put on myself in the first place, because it's not a case of finding someone who's like, you know, the level of Stephanie Vaquer to replace it. That's the level of match we want at this event, you know. So even if Stephanie Vaquer hadn't even if that hadn't been publicly announced and that's what people were looking forward to, I would still put that pressure on myself to be able to deliver in that situation, because that's the level we're working to. You know, we don't want to be working to lesser levels. We don't want to have that ado kind of attitude. And I feel that you have that spirit, you have that attitude, and that's infectious across the entire roster. And you know, like, they know how hard we work to put together these cards. They know, like I say, MJF versus Michael Oku would have done at Summer Sizzler. We didn't need to stack the card. We didn't need to have Dijak versus Robbie X, or Trevor Lee versus Luke Jacobs, or Jack Cartwheel versus Luke Jacobs, versus Leon Slater.
Leon, yeah.
We need to do that, because we could have sold the tickets with MJF alone. But that's not our style. We want to deliver the best. We call ourselves pro wrestling at its best for a reason, and that's what we will deliver time and time again. So yes, there's a pressure, but we always put that pressure on ourselves, so it's no different than usual.
I've got a few more topics here, but Kyle, is there anything else you wanted to hit on the anniversary show?
I'll leave you to wrap up the anniversary show, and then I'll jump back in at the end.
Okay, sure. Obviously, we've talked about some of the matches. Elsewhere, we've got Donovan Dijak versus Gabe Kidd that just got announced. That's going to be a great one. We've got the Cruiserweight Scramble for Neon's Championship. Cutthroat Collective in a 5-on-5 tag match, of course. What else stands out to you? Maybe something that fans aren't going in thinking about, but what stands out to you on this card?
What doesn't stand out to me? I mean, it's everything. I mean, you've got the Sunshine Machine story. You know, they either win the tag team championships, or they no longer team together in Revolution Pro Wrestling, and that's a story that's obviously been bubbling under for a long time now. You know, and it's something which is coming to fruition and really starting to blossom at the right time. You saw at Your Call how much the people believe in Sunshine Machine. You saw that party-like atmosphere that they're able to create. You know, it's going to go one way or the other at the Copper Box. So, yes, that's very exciting. We've got, I'm just trying to think what else we've got on the card. Ethan Allen's return from injury.
Ethan Allen kind of
he's returned from injury already. Let's make no mistake about that. Ethan Allen's back, but Ethan Allen's now firing on all cylinders. It takes a little while to get going, but for Ethan Allen, this is a real highlight moment for him, because this is the type of night he would have dreamed of when he was injured and wanted to claw his way back to. And this is where he's got to. And to me, that it's so great to be able to see that for Ethan Allen. But, look, up and down the card, the opportunities for the likes of Golden Boy Santos and David Francisco. They're going to be teaming with the Greedy Souls against Joshua James, Charles Samuels, and Youngblood. So Joshua James, of course, another person through the Baltimore School of Wrestling. Just great opportunities for those guys to get known in front of these crowds. It's like I say, from top to bottom, 10-match card. Everything's got a purpose. Everything's got a reason. There's nothing there which is designed to be filler. And like I say, there's levels to this, and we recognise that. And we are presenting the highest level possible. Of course, we're going to aim to put in some twists and turns. We're going to aim to kind of get people talking again, and create those moments that people walk away from. Stuff that they look. We always say don't expect surprises because they're not surprises. So I'm not promising you surprises. I'm promising you moments. I'm promising you moments you're going to remember for a long time to come. I'm promising you moments that will be ingrained in your mind as those, because nothing can make you feel like pro wrestling can make you feel, and it's nights like this that really have the opportunity to make you feel. So, so our objective is to make the audience feel, to make them walk away with those moments. It's unfair for me to sit here and pick one thing over another, because obviously huge opportunities. People like like Oku and Jacobs, just as an example, huge opportunity. So like I say, it's just it's exciting, and it's impossible to pick one thing that excites me the most, because it's it's put together by me as a wrestling fan, thinking through the eyes of a wrestling fan, and I can't wait to see that vision become a reality.
Yeah, obviously, you talk about creating those moments. Going back to last year, you obviously talk also about this whole thing as a process, one fan at a time. That whole thing. So looking back a year ago, what has been the impact of that show for the company as a whole? Obviously, this year, I think it feels like the biggest year in RevPro history, especially in terms of like the amount of shows you're running, things like that. But what was the long-term impact of that show last year that you've been able to notice so far?
So with every big show we do, we see a spike in our on-demand subscribers. Now we always expect them to go back down, the month or so after a show, and they do go down. But the big key is that we retain more fans than we lose. So we always wind up at a higher foundation point than before. So that tells you you're doing something right, because people are staying invested in the product. And obviously we can see it's not like a case of, people forgot to end their subscription or whatever. We can see the views we're getting for our live events. And if you look at, and in particular, the monthly shows we do in London, and I think that they do very well purely because it's a first Sunday of every month. Everyone knows to look out for them, etc. But we look at our live broadcasts, and our live broadcasts have probably quadrupled in numbers of people that watch the event live, right? So we know that we've got active and engaged subscribers on our VOD service. So that is very, very important, because the reality of the situation is that's the spine, that's the foundation of Revolution Pro Wrestling, that VOD service, and we just want to help grow that, so that helped us. It really helped us a lot, because again, without boring people, like we were with Pivot Share before, we switched across. We saw the writing on the wall maybe about 6 months to a year before everyone else did, it seemed, and we kind of switched our service. But it was like so hard, because the uptake in the new service and convincing people to jump, because look, we've set ourselves up in a service whereby now, if we switch service, we can essentially retain all our subscribers. They're just going to have to get new usernames and passwords for the new service, because the payment system isn't connected to the on-demand service. The subscriptions can continue rolling, so we've kind of future-proofed ourselves in that respect. It's cost us a lot more money to be able to do it, but as an end result, the quality of the final output is much higher, and the live streaming ability is there, and of which we're live streaming every single show, and it's Yeah, the whole thing's better basically. It just means that obviously it's costing more risk, but again more reward. So now we've been able to get the first time after the anniversary show, we're able to get the show the on-demand service to the level that it was before we'd switched across. So that for me is the biggest thing. In addition to that, it no doubt created more awareness for the product, more brand awareness. It no doubt created new fans for the product. Who now they might not come to every show, but you start to see them pop up here and there at different shows. The amount of people I've spoken to who say my first show was that copper box is crazy, right? So we've no doubt been able to convert people who are just fans of AEW or fans of there were fans who came to that show, maybe not even fans of AEW, just WWE fans who wanted to come to Wembley Stadium because of Wembley Stadium and wrestling at Wembley Stadium, and then we're like, oh, we're in London, we might as well come along to the show. Now, on the day last year, we sold more tickets for that show on the day last year than we have done for any show in our history on the day, and we sold so many tickets. Like, I can't even begin to emphasize how many tickets. I couldn't even believe it. Like, I came away from I had a shower in the morning, and as all wrestling fans should,
especially in the summer.
Yeah. I know someone who's just experienced your call.
Your call was very hot on Sunday. I mean, it's a good job the 229's got air conditioning now, you said.
Yeah, well, we hope so. That was their excuse. So it best be on full blast. I mean, it costs too much money. We'll have to take your hire fee up. Like, turn it off, open the doors, open the windows.
I mean, 229 is basically a basement. So
yeah. I came out of a shower and I'd sold so many tickets. It was probably the most profitable shower I've ever had in my life. So if I could have more showers like that, it'll be perfect. So, but yeah, there are a lot of fans who just made that decision on the day to come along, and then as a result, hung on as fans. I think that again, without going off too much on a side note, I think that What Culture Pro Wrestling existed and was a gateway drug for a lot of wrestling fans, or a lot of independent wrestling fans, the gateway into independent professional wrestling. Full of casual wrestling fans. You can say what you like about them. It was full of casual wrestling fans who would go to those shows and they'd see the guys and then they'd be like, right, now I need to hunt out their matches. They'd hunt out their matches, they'd find RevPro. And the industry's been missing something like that, really. And stuff like this show at Wembley Stadium have been the opportunity for us to do things like that. And obviously by making that statement and going to the arena, in many ways you're saying, look, this is a premium product. You're saying to the people, this is a premium product, and it's being priced as such as well, out of necessity. If you knew the cost of everything, you'd fall off your seat. I think this is the thing, it set us up as a legitimate promotion. It brought brand awareness. It brought new fans. It brought new subscribers to the on-demand service. And perhaps most importantly, it gave us a wave of momentum that we could ride, that we could take advantage of. So, I can't say anything. I can't take anything but positives away from that. And the footage it created, the pictures it created, the memories it created, you can trade off that for a lifetime. So. It's just I don't get satisfied very easily. We have to keep going. We have to build more memories. We have to keep growing, and that's the mentality. I'm not going to rest on my laurels, but it was without a doubt a huge home run, huge success, and like I say, we're just excited to be doing it again this year, and then hopefully building on that.
Yeah, despite that, obviously, you talk about the costs. You talk about the fact that second year you're often going to see a drop off. Was there ever a thought, obviously less people coming in for AEW this year as well, was there ever a thought, let's not do Copper Box again? It's an expensive building, it's risky, let's just do Crystal Palace? Or was it always going to be Copper Box again for you?
It was always, so it's a funny story because we wanted to announce a Copper Box show a lot sooner, but the contract for the Copper Box was, so it's like an Olympic legacy venue, which has many issues with it because of that. But the contract for Copper Box is 10-year leases. So the current occupier, their lease was up. So then it had to, the contract essentially went for tender to other operators, including themselves, who resubmitted a bid. So basically, when we announced the copper box, so we booked the copper box provisionally in the first week of September last year. We booked the copper box, but it was penciled in, it was provisional, and it was a case of the contract is up for renewal in October. We should know in October if we get it, and if we do, you can have the date, and if you don't, we'll have to put you in touch with the new people, and there's going to be new terms and conditions, new blah blah blah. So we got to October, which of course when we ran our Royal Quest, with New Japan, or for New Japan, we kind of hosted it. We don't run it. New Japan book it and book the wrestlers and whatever. We just facilitate it for them, make sure everything's operates on the ground level, and on that, and liaise with the venues and stuff. And on that show, they were like, "Oh, we're pretty sure we've got it, but you know, it's not going to be announced officially for a couple of weeks. So you can't announce it until a couple of weeks' time." And then fast forward to, I think it was probably February, March. I think it was like maybe end of February, start of March, when finally we were able to confirm that we were able to go ahead and run the show. It was touch and go for a minute, and then we had Crystal Palace booked as well as a kind of backup. But we wanted to do the copper box because really, obviously, we didn't know how AEW was going to do, but kind of had a hunch it'd do very well, obviously. We obviously always hope that it's going to do the same as the year before. But our mindset was, I think there was a lot of people who didn't attend the Copper Box show last year because of the perception of it's just an indie, it's a little indie, people who haven't experienced Revolution Pro Wrestling before. And then they saw what happened on the day, they watched the show on demand, they've seen the reviews of the show, they've seen the pictures of the show, and then they're like, I want to be a part of that next year. So I thought that put us in for almost like a more sound foundation than before. So, I thought that would counteract perhaps less people go into the AEW show. But like I say, I'm not suggesting AEW are going to sell 40,000 tickets in a week, but I do think there's going to be a lot of last-minute ticket buys for AEW as well. I think it's going to be a huge success, and I hope that, when people are buying their last-minute tickets to AEW, they book some last-minute tickets to RevPro whilst they're at it as well. But yeah, it's always been about for me, daring to dream, putting my money where its mouth is, and that go big or go home mentality. So I'd have only been regretting it if we hadn't booked Copper Box. I'd only would have been regretting it. Right now, if we were at Crystal Palace right now, the show would be sold out, and I'd be going, damn, how many more could we have sold? We're never going to know. And not just that, if we were at the Copper Box, it would have much better air conditioning. So yeah, never in doubt.
Yeah, hopefully not the rain of Copper Box last year, though.
It was weird, wasn't it? Yeah, very weird.
RevPro umbrellas yet, or no?
Sorry? Oh, no umbrellas yet. No. Because I have faith. I have faith in climate change. Let's go. Eat all the way.
Was there anything else you wanted to hit just at all, Kyle? Because I've got a couple little topics that are completely unrelated, but apart from that.
I'm gonna have to cut it off. So I was gonna get to my last thing. To kind of switch. I mean, you already mentioned it then with AEW. Obviously, that is it almost feels like a little WrestleMania weekend for us in the UK with getting All In and getting the RevPro anniversary show the same weekend, which I think is fantastic. And of course, one of the names that most people will associate with RevPro, and yourself, even Will Ospreay. Obviously, you've watched him do these big shows in New Japan for many years now, but I'm sure there's a different feeling watching Will, who you know very well, wrestle at Wembley Stadium, right? That's a thing that even by his own huge ambitions, I'm sure he would have, maybe dreamed of, but it's wishful thinking to think that he would get to wrestle in front of that many people at Wembley Stadium. He obviously did it last year. What was that like to watch him wrestle Chris Jericho at Wembley Stadium? And then, of course, going into this year where you'll be wrestling MJF, and in the space of a year, really has become one of the top names in AEW, which I don't think anyone ever doubted that he would be.
Yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? No one ever doubted. Well, a lot of people doubted him, but anyone who knew him, anyone that knows, anyone who's not trying to pretend that he's something that he's not. A lot of people just say like, "Oh, Will Ospreay can't wrestle. Will Ospreay can't." Look, the biggest achievement I will give him is Jim Cornette now refers to him by his real name. Do you know what I mean? Like Jim Cornette wanted to hate him so bad, so bad, right? But he couldn't help but appreciate that he is actually a very good professional wrestler. And anyone who sees him for the first time, like I say, it's easy to be blinded by out of context clips, but Will Ospreay is fundamentally sound. He's able to make a connection like no one else. And, like I say, like anyone who knows. You can't kid yourselves and just say, like he's crap and, not listen to logic and reasoning or whatever. You can even, a lot of people I've seen even go into Will Ospreay matches with folded arms, not wanting to enjoy themselves and then coming unglued by the end of it. He's a very talented performer, like I say, able to make connections with the crowd. It was great seeing Will on that stage, because throughout the years, look, I've seen countless wrestlers who deserve to be on that stage, who have never quite got to that stage, who've never got what they truly deserve. So to see Will Ospreay get what he truly deserves, especially people who know his journey and people who know he's had opportunities to for example, go to WWE. It dates back to when he first went to New Japan Pro Wrestling. He had an opportunity to go to the Cruiserweight Classic. He'd already verbally committed to do the Best of Super Juniors for New Japan. He had an opportunity. He was at a crossroads. He could either do that thing that he dreamed of as a child and go to WWE and do that Cruiserweight Classic. Who knows what he would have led to? Or he could have followed his heart, and the fact that he wanted to be a professional wrestler. He wanted to be a wrestler. He didn't want to be a sports entertainer. He wanted to be a wrestler. He followed his heart. He stayed loyal to New Japan. They stayed loyal to him. And look, I remember saying to him, what you want to do is you want to put yourself in a position whereby WWE wants you. It's not take it or leave it with WWE. And bearing in mind, this was before AEW was a thing. And this was a case of, I said to him, I just used the example of AJ Styles had been our heavyweight champion. And he'd just gone to WWE. And I said to him, you want to be an AJ Styles. You want to be the guy that goes in with all the hype, that bypasses the NXT system, that goes straight into the main roster, who gets a push and, gets paid accordingly because they built up this huge body of work outside, and people recognize how great they are. And look what happened. He was in a position where WWE wanted him and AEW wanted him, and he's now put himself in a position which he openly talks about, where he's able to be set for life, he's able to look after his family, he's able to be comfortable, he's able to continue to do the thing that he loves to do. So nothing could make me prouder than seeing him do this in a week in, week out basis, and not just that, seeing how it translates to that national audience. Because I looked at it when he first came in, I was like, well, I'm not sure about this presentation, right? But something about Will just makes stuff work. It can't be denied. And I just feel like the reactions he gets in these arenas, given he's relatively new to being on TV, the reaction he gets, even the reaction he got at Wembley Stadium last year, because there was a lot of people going, no one's going to know who Will Ospreay is. Did you hear the reaction when he came out? So I just believe that it's great to see him on that stage. It's great to see him on that level, and he's doing what we all knew he'd be able to do from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I'm sure you're just as excited as I am to see him. This time, there's not going to be any questions this time of who's going to know Will Ospreay. As you said yourself, he can show up in an arena in the middle of nowhere in America and look like the biggest star ever. So I'm sure it will be absolutely phenomenal. Steve had some camera issues, so he's just slipped out for a second. So I'm sure he will be back. But either way, Andy, thank you so much for your time on this, like I said, incredibly busy period for you. That is August 24th at the Copper Box, the anniversary show. And as you said, as you were working tirelessly to achieve, the Summer Sizzler event is up on the on-demand service, so people can go and check that out as well. I'll pull back. Steve, was there anything else that you wanted to add before Andy gets out of there?
No, my battery literally died on my laptop. That's what it was. Just one thing from me, completely unrelated. You announced Global Wars. for October, Doncaster Dome. Obviously, that's a new territory for you. You obviously made a big splash in Europe this year as well. You know, Spain earlier in the year. That's where you found Josiah, who's gone on to become a big star for the promotion now. It really feels like Germany in a couple of weeks. There's a lot of new sort of territories opening up, almost on the base or on the back of the Copperbox show last year and kind of the hype of that brought to the promotion. Just talk a little bit about this moving into Europe and on the Global Wars show. It's around the same time as Royal Quest, and I know you've said on your Twitter Q&As that it's not replacing anything. It's a new show, or it's a show you're bringing back. But is there an update on if there could potentially be a Royal Quest this year?
Well, New Japan's going through a rebuilding phase right now. I think it's clear to see in the G1, and you know, they do see the UK market as a very important market for them, and there's obviously definitely been discussions in that direction. I'm not privy to give any information away or
of course.
tell you what way everything's leaning. But all I would say is just keep your eyes peeled on New Japan Pro Wrestling programming, because I suspect that there could be something coming up. Now, when I said this show's not replacing anything, that's exactly what I meant. You know, this is a Revolution Pro Wrestling show. Of course, we're going to leverage our partnerships with people like New Japan Pro Wrestling, maybe CMLL, maybe AEW. You know, we're going to leverage partnerships. That's what Global Wars is all about. We've got an opportunity now to do something bigger than we did before, because again, before it was obviously just New Japan and RevPro. So we've got an opportunity to kind of leverage those partnerships, make something exciting, make something memorable, and do what we continue to do in terms of making memories. So that's obviously coming to Doncaster Dome, like you say, exciting new territory for us, and something that we have to do if we're going to continue to grow, and something that we're trying to do in terms of presenting that premium show, that premium product, to give fans no excuse. If you're a wrestling fan, you need to be in Doncaster on October 19th. And as far as New Japan Pro Wrestling goes, just keep watching New Japan programming. Like I say, those Royal Quest shows, they're not RevPro shows, they're New Japan shows. They're New Japan booked, they're New Japan promoted. All we do is, you know, we essentially make the calls, we make the contacts, you know, we do whatever we need to do to be able to facilitate the show, and make sure it happens for New Japan. So that's kind of our role in that process. And you know, and when the next Royal Quest gets announced, that will be announced by New Japan Pro Wrestling. But like I say, they're very, very, you know, you can see by watching the G1, the process they're under right now, and to me, it's an exciting time for G1. There's been so many great matches so far, and I'm sure there's going to be more still to come as we're approaching the final week of it. So it's a fresh and exciting lineup, and I feel that could roll over into some New Japan shows in the United Kingdom moving forward, and almost with that same mindset of rebuilding, looking at, you know, trying to almost rebuild that New Japan brand post Will Ospreay in the UK, you know. But it's like I say, it's exciting. It's an exciting time, and I think that as wrestling fans, we can all be very excited about the prospects and possibilities, because you're sat there now almost, I don't say expecting a Royal Quest show, but the fact that it's even a possibility is something that even 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, it wouldn't have even come into our mindsets of, will we get a full New Japan Pro Wrestling show in the UK? So for me, I think that it shows you how far we've come as a professional wrestling world, as a professional wrestling nation, that we can be sitting here asking when the next New Japan Pro Wrestling show is going to be within the United Kingdom. So like I say, it's an exciting time to be a wrestling fan.
Yeah, of course. You mentioned G1. There's a lot of RevPro interest in the G1. Just what's that been like for you to watch, just as a partner, but as a fan as well, seeing guys like Newman, Gabe Kidd, Yota Tsuji in there as well.
It's great. Everyone, like from and again, like you see, like Sho Trumono, Zack Sabre Jr. Just it's great to see that, and it's great, and it's something that I always lean back on when I say to people, don't take these times for granted. understand what you're witnessing. You're witnessing the best wrestlers in the world in their primes competing. And the fact that what I love the most about it, and it shows you how much RevPro means to a lot of these people. You saw it with Will Ospreay. You see it all the time with Zack Sabre Jr. You're seeing it with Gabe Kidd. You know, these guys, and Callum Newman. Look, Callum Newman lives in Japan now, right? He was back for 10 days before the start of G1, but he had to throw in a RevPro show before he left back for Japan, right? Just had to do it. So it's great for me to see how thankful and grateful these guys are for the platform. And not just that, but it's not, I'm not saying for me and the platform I give, but also towards the other wrestlers, because they know that they can come back and they can put eyeballs on the product, they can help it grow, and they can pay it back to the next generation, you know, and they know that they can take advice that they've learned on their journeys around the world, and they can bring it back and pass it back to the next generation. And that's why the depth grows and gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And like I say, it makes me so happy to see that. And, you know, regarding, just for example, Zack Sabre Jr., it's not like me coming to Zack and saying, would you be able to do the copper box? Zack comes to me and says, who am I wrestling at the copper box then? You know? And he's wrestling Hechicero, and that's a match we've not spoken about, but
yeah,
two of the
incredible
best wrestlers in the world. End of, you know. So that's why it's so great to see these guys in, you know, in these high profile positions. And like I say, like it makes me proud. I've always made a point of saying I take no credit for any of these people's successes. All I've done is given them a platform or given them a canvas to paint their art, so to speak. They've had to do all the hard work themselves, and when they're as talented as they are, it's easy to put them in winning situations. So you know, I say like it's great for them to do that, and also when they do that and they come out, and, you know, they shine when they do that. It kind of further validates that we're doing the right things, and it further validates the principles of, if you can get over in multiple territories, you can get over anywhere. And obviously that's exactly what Will Ospreay's done as well. So, you know, do not underestimate the importance of independent professional wrestling at any level, because you might be seeing tomorrow's superstars today, you know. So yeah, I think that's the biggest advert for RevPro and exactly what we do, seeing the success that those names have, and even people like El Phantasmo, who of course is coming back. He was a RevPro regular for 2-3 years before he went over to New Japan Pro Wrestling. So, and he always makes a point of coming back for these big shows as well. So it's great to see, and it's like I say, it makes me smile. It really does make me smile, because all I want to see is professional wrestling grow and people succeed. And if I can succeed as a result of them succeeded, even better. But, you know, like I say, regardless of what happens with our roster going to other places and, you know, bigger and better things and whatever have you, I will continue with my mission to try and make Revolution Pro Wrestling as big as possible, and to try and provide a platform for people to get work, experience, and hopefully, as we go on, to make RevPro being full-time for more people become a more and more realistic proposition. I'm not saying I'm not saying full-time contracts and etc. etc. We're always going to be independent unless someone wants to give us loads and loads of money. But the reality is, it'll be nice to be able to get into a position where we can make enough money that people don't have to worry about, you know, scratching and clawing for bookings and merch sales, etc., etc., etc. It's a process. It's a very slow process. We've been plugging away for 12 years, but we're in a lot better position now than we were in 2012. So that's all the evidence I need to say that we're on the right path and we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to end it, Kyle.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It started, you know, in a better place 12 years ago than you were at the start. And that is what, even though the anniversary show is not a culmination, like you said, it is just in many ways the beginning of just a new chapter. We are looking forward to this anniversary. Thank you again for your time, Andy. Again, August 24th, Copper Box. People go and get tickets. Don't leave it until the last day. And RevPro on demand to watch Summer Sizzler.
I want to stress, if you do leave it to the last day, still buy tickets. Okay.
Oh yeah, buy the tickets regardless.
Yeah, there's no time to not buy tickets. Just keep buying tickets.